Nothing has made me feel like this with all the other things that I've done. Anyone dealing with an ongoing chronic health complaint, they could benefit. I've now hacked the process through just sheer desperation. And so now this is the system that I teach my clients. And this is the system that gets results.
Welcome to the Wiser Than Before podcast, where each episode will get a little wiser. I'm your host, Josh Dodds. On this episode of Wiser Than Before, we talk about what is a liver flush and how liver flushing was a game changer for our guests' health. Elizabeth Wells is a nutritionist with advanced training in EFT and other nervous system regulation techniques, and she's a veteran liver flusher as well. In this episode, Elizabeth covers who might be suffering from liver stagnation, why it's more common than you think, how liver congestion happens and how it builds up over time, and also the misconception that the liver cleans itself. She also explains why you cannot fix a gut problem without adequate bile, what successful liver flushing looks like, and her eureka moment when everything with her health changed. Outside of that, we also talk about the trust factor in finding reliable health information, how to make progress in your health when you feel stuck, the amazing feeling of experiencing pure bile flow for the first time, and tools to improve your self-talk. And finally, Elizabeth lets us in on the secret to better liver flushes, plus the importance of keeping bile thin and moving and how to do that. It's a jam-packed episode. Enjoy. Real quick before we get started, please note that liver flushing is not for the faint of heart and is not something to just rush into. As always, this podcast is educational and no medical advice is given. You need to see your medical provider for that. At the same time, liver flushing has been a powerful remedy for so many people, which is why I'm excited to bring you this episode so you can learn more about it. If it's something you want to consider doing, please take the time to further educate yourself, including speaking with someone who's experienced with liver flushing. And now, on to the episode. Elizabeth, what is a liver flush and how the heck did you first find out about them?
Liver flush is a very old detoxification method. And it is, I can summarize it thus. You do a week of preparation, which includes taking certain ingredients to soften stones that might be sitting in the liver. I guess we can talk about why that might be happening in the first place as we go on. But so you take ingredients to soften stones and congestion that is sitting in the liver and in the common bile duct, and you do that for a week. And it is a kind of fairly straightforward method to remove obstructions in the liver. So we're creating obstructions in the liver all the time. So yes, the liver is, I guess, the major kind of detoxification organ in our bodies. And many people, or the conventional wisdom is that the liver looks after itself. The liver cleans itself. But those of us in the detox community who have discovered this protocol, which is still, I would say, quite niche, is that the liver often struggles to clean itself. And in fact, we are bombarding it on a daily basis with a lot of toxins from various kind of avenues, both external, so in our environment, through diet, through the kind of potentially, toxic modern world that we inhabit, with lots of kind of very new chemicals that our bodies don't know how to interpret. And also what I would say internal toxins, so a lot of internal toxicity. And the ideal scenario is that when when these toxins enter our bodies, our kidneys and our livers are supposed to filter them, and they are eliminated through the urine and the feces for the most part. But for various reasons, the liver can get overwhelmed. And these toxins tend to then get recirculated back to the liver. So the liver is a very efficient organ. It will recirculate bile up to 15 times a day. And only 5% of the bile that is kind of recirculated ends up getting excreted through a stool. 95% of it goes back into the circulation. And what happens is that bile gets quite thick, quite sticky and sludgy. It becomes imbalanced, so you get excess cholesterol. And the excess cholesterol means the bile does not flow in the way that it should. And so what the liver is forced to do is to parcel up that toxic bile and cholesterol and package it up as little plugs, if you like, little fatty plugs, and secrete them in the liver tissue and also in the gallbladder. In the gallbladder, you tend to get the calcified ones, so gallstones, but they start their life in the liver and then they drop down into the gallbladder when they get hard and when they get large. So when we do a liver flush, we are, if you like, manually eliminating a lot of those obstructions. And so you take these simple household ingredients to soften the obstructions over the course of a week. It can be a bit more complex than that if you want it to be. And then on the day of the flush, you choose a day, or generally a weekend, when people are not having to work or kind of take care of business. And you would take something like Epsom salts or magnesium citrate. And that relaxes and dilates the bile ducts and then allows these obstructions to pass through and be eliminated. And then the flush itself, you drink olive oil and lemon juice or olive oil and grapefruit juice, and that causes a huge contraction of the gallbladder and it releases a load of bile, and the bile washes into the common bile duct and sweeps out whatever is sitting there. Sometimes that's a lot of material. Sometimes it's a little material. Sometimes, sometimes you get flukes or parasites coming out. I mean, it's one of those things that some people love it and some people hate it. Some people love the kind of almost like unwrapping a Christmas present the next day. Like, what am I going to get?
You never know. You're gonna find out if you've been good or bad, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And so that, in a nutshell, is the process.
Okay. When would someone find out that they have these obstructions or something like it? Because I agree with you, liver flush is still a bit niche, though it's rapidly expanding, I think, as a result of poor liver health in more and more people, as you mentioned, our just kind of stressful, toxic world. But for the average person who that's still a foreign concept, I think for a lot of people, it is, until, again, they find that maybe they need to do a liver flush. That's what it was for me. I mean, I've never even heard of this thing. And then come to find out, a lot of my health issues came back to a very stagnant liver and gallbladder. But that was in my mid 30s, and after living a more or less, normal health life, no major issues. So it was quite a shock and surprise. And then some of our friends that we find that you mentioned, liver flukes or other parasites, and it's just astonishing what we can hold in our bodies. And so many people I talk to or clients that do a liver flush, it just every time comes back. Christmas is kind of an analogy because it's like a huge surprise. They have no idea, and they're just shocked. And then after a couple times, they start to get used to the drill, and then usually feel better over time and start to get really motivated to clean all that stuff out. But how do you find that people first realize that they have an obstruction, or that if someone hasn't had a major health crisis, how they might want to think about this information or possibility?
So usually the people with the most stagnant livers and what we would call cholestasis, so that would be slow bile flow, are the ones who have probably a gut issue, and maybe they're aware of that. So it might start in the digestion. So maybe you might be bloated a lot, might have constipation. That's a common one. Gas, bad breath, food intolerances is a big one. That's sensitivity. Leaky gut goes hand in glove with cholestasis, because when you have a leaky gut, then you've got a lot of toxicity passing through the gut wall all the time, going back to the liver. So that would be a big one. SIBO is a big one that people have at the moment. It's that seems to be a major. So anything that involves the gut is going to be poor bile flow, because it makes sense. If you've got a gut issue, then you're not digesting your food well, and you've probably got digestive insufficiency. So like I said before, you've got all these amazing digestive fluids that are supposed to balance the pH. They're supposed to help, break down our fats and proteins and carbohydrates. And if that's not happening and you've got significant gut problems, then it suggests that you've got an insufficiency of those digestive fluids. Anger is another major one. Anger, depression, and anxiety, they're kind of like the kind of triumvirate of sort of emotional stagnation. PMT is a major one for women. Estrogen dominance, again, is a major issue for women, because, those hormones are supposed to be, conjugated and excreted through the liver. And if they're not, then they're being recirculated and causing these symptoms of dominance. So those would be, some of the kind of most common ones. And I would say if anyone is dealing with an ongoing chronic health complaint or an autoimmune issue with a lot of inflammation, they could benefit from doing a series of liver flushes.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of different potential warning signs or symptoms to look at. And a lot of those, yeah, I mean, that list is so common, of what you gave. Most people could check one or two of those off at a minimum. But I think what's more common right now is people say they've, go to a little bit more to the functional medicine or holistic health side. Then one of the first things they'll bump into is gut health, which is obviously important, but that's become more common. People are more aware of that. I don't think it's nearly as common for someone to think about liver health, like, oh, I'm connecting my heartburn or indigestion to liver health, or even the emotions. That's another one, like this constant anger or resentment, connecting that back to liver health. So I think there's still some education that will happen over time, or people become more familiar, just like gut health did the last 10 years. And that's become much more, mainstream, and people are aware and have conversations of it. I personally think that that's going to happen more and more with the liver in the coming years. Do you see it that way, or do you see it differently?
No, I'm with you on that. I mean, I'm frustrated in a way, because I feel, this is a bit of a bugbear of mine, so I will try not to go on like a long diatribe about it. But I am constantly amazed by how little research and published clinical research there is in the links between the gut and the liver. I mean, it seems to me like there's a major deficit of this stuff. I mean, there's a lot of research into fatty liver, and there's loads of research into the microbiome. But why is nobody, making the connection and joining the dots between this explosion of gut health problems that we are seeing, and, understanding the microbiome and the liver as a kind of functioning relationship? Because you cannot fix a gut problem without adequate bile. And also the other thing that's a big, gap in this knowledge sector is that, the pancreas and the liver share a common exit. So, there's this amazing little valve called the ampulla of Vata or Vata, I never know how to pronounce that is shared in the common bile duct. And when the common bile duct is full of stones, then the pancreas can't release its enzymes. So for anybody who's got major blood sugar issues or is, insulin resistant, there is a lot of congestion in that liver. And the pancreas isn't going to work optimally until the liver health is also addressed. So it's just stuff like that. You've got these doctors being paid, collectively billions. But there's almost like a willful ignorance there in terms of understanding the connections between organs, because we are holistic. We are a whole body. We're not a set of organs. And yet the way that Western medicine has evolved is for everybody to be in their own little silo, disconnected from the research that, other clinicians are doing. So yeah, it's a major bugbear of mine, because I still think that, yes, I'm hoping it will catch up. And I am glad to see a much more kind of open and progressive understanding of gut health, particularly actually now connecting emotional states with gut health. That seems to be something that's on the rise. In the UK, there's talk about ADHD and the connection with gut health and things. So I think it's all moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's tough. Maybe we'll go into this in a second with your story, but it's tough to go through health challenges and that go on for years and years. And then you do a bunch of research, try everything that's recommended. It either helps a little or maybe it makes you worse in some cases. It's tough to go through that for years and then come to find things that do help and come to a more like holistic mindset, like you mentioned, and realize you can't just do one thing. Even gut health, if you just do that and ignore your liver, for example, like people will just can keep suffering. And so I agree. It is frustrating to realize, I need to regain my health and my vitality and be the person, I'm meant to be, and not be slogging through life and heavy and drained of energy and sick. To do that, I need to support myself holistically, with the food, with the circadian rhythm, with the healthy emotions, good people, etc. When you live that and see how true that is and what a difference it makes, then yeah, it's quite frustrating to hear, just looking at things as if they're in a test tube and, knowing everything about, the scientific microscopic parts. Well, not everything, but a lot of facts and data, but totally missing, the beauty of how it all flows together, the miracle of how it all flows together. And what I found personally is that when I got the holistic part right, I mean, the body has an incredible wisdom, and it's, evolved over millions of years. The body knows how to work with the genius that, we may never consciously have, and we lose all that when we just focus on these on one part, for example. So I totally I feel that too. But with that said, what was your journey, or what significant events eventually brought you to a liver flush or whatever else in holistic health that made a big difference for you?
So I think my kind of story is a kind of testament to persistence in a way, because I had kind of quite serious health issues from about the age of maybe 10. And even before that, I was quite sickly. So I was just one of those sickly children, just always sick, multiple infections, took a lot of antibiotics. And I developed what I now know to be was a candida problem. And in the kind of, I guess, early 90s, there was this book called The Yeast Connection by Dr. Crook. Great name. And my mum and I, she had the same problem, kind of embarked upon a candida diet at the time. It was quite, it was a new thing. And that kind of almost catapulted me in as a teenager, already having to think about my health a lot and my diet. So I completely changed my diet. And I battled with this for a really long time. And it kind of got worse. Every decade kind of got worse. It's, as we know with candida or severe candida overgrowth, it can be quite debilitating. It can be quite difficult to fix. It got really entrenched. We saw a number of specialists. I was taking hardcore pharmaceutical antifungals for 7 or 8 years. And I think that really wrecked my liver. because at the time there was just this understanding you have to kill it off. So, if you went online in the early 2000s, it was all about killing Candida. So I just tried multiple different diets. I tried multiple different supplements and approaches. And my health was really bad for a while. Led to all sorts of hormonal issues, fatigue. I got chronic fatigue syndrome when I was 30. And I never really kind of recovered from that. And just everything I didn't really make much difference. So I changed my diet. I'd take a different supplement. I'd go and see a homeopath. I did acupuncture. I did Chinese herbs. I did Ayurvedic herbs. I did reflexology. I did early bioresonance testing. I did, pretty much everything there was available at the time. And then after my health got really bad, after I got chronic fatigue syndrome, I decided, and I washed my hands of the doctors by then, because I remember going to them and giving them all this information, all this research that I'd come up with about my condition. And at the time, I also had electro-hypersensitivity syndrome. So I couldn't tolerate any kind of devices. I couldn't work with a computer. I couldn't work with Wi-Fi. I couldn't use a mobile phone. And if I did do any of those things, then my face would light up like a beetroot and I'd get tingling and numbness and things. And I just felt like a total freak. So I thought, right, well, no doctor's going to help me. I've got to try and solve this on my own. So I studied to be a nutritionist. And then I just worked in kind of conventional practice, with supplements and dietary changes, but never really felt terribly well. And then after I had my son, it was a very, very difficult birth and delivery because I wasn't a very healthy person. And that was kind of, if you like, a complete sort of collapse after that. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't rest. I was wired all the time, very, very anxious. And I was kind of in a bad place, in the sort of despair, really, with everything. And I would spend days kind of, trawling the internet and reading and looking at Cure Zone. So in those days, it was Cure Zone was the website for kind of health advice. And I remember seeing somebody on there say something like, with Candida, you can't, it's like a shit. It's like, excuse the language, it's like a shit pile. You can't just go killing the flies on the shit pile. You have to actually take it away. And I was like, oh. So he was kind of likening the Candida to sort of flies, I guess, breaking down waste. And it sounds so simple, but nobody had ever really put it to me like that before. I'd never really thought, I'd spent so much time and energy trying to kill this thing. But of course, it kept growing back. You can't kill something when the terrain is polluted and dirty and, just not optimal. So, and then the same guy was talking about liver flushing, and it was just a light bulb moment, one of those kind of eureka moments where everything changes. And I got the book. I did the first one. I should actually say that when I studied to be a nutritionist several years before, I had done 3 liver flushes. Even though my nutrition teacher said that they were all bogus. So she kind of said, oh, don't do liver flushes. She said, all you do is, poop out the little balls of olive oil. I thought, I'm going to just try it anyway. So I did 3 liver flushes and didn't get anything out, not a single stone. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I don't have any stones then. I must be just one of those miraculous people who doesn't have any, because I didn't understand that actually what was the problem was that I was so congested and I had so much congestion in my liver that I couldn't get it out. That was the problem. So fast forward several years, and I don't know why I decided to try it again, having not had any success originally, but I did. And this time I think I prepped differently. I kind of maybe did a few more things that Andreas Moritz suggested to do. And I worked really hard to try and make the first one a success. And it was a success. And I remember feeling like a small but significant lifting of energy and mood, and thinking, wow, nothing has made me feel like this with all the other things that I've done. And what was interesting about it was I knew that it had taken something away for me to feel like that. I wasn't taking a supplement. I wasn't adding something to my regime. I was taking something out. That was the beginning, really. And I got the bit between my teeth and went with it.
Yeah. I'd imagine you felt that poorly for that long than to get a boost, any kind of boost, but especially with what you're saying, like finally don't have to pop another pill or do maybe all the different things you were trying. Like, yeah, that's like a huge turning point. When your health is, when you feel that weight of a chronic health issue and then you get any boost, it's amazing because you just see the power of like human will and hope. And even though there's still a long way to go, it's like you get that glimmer of light and boom, off to the races. Why not? If nothing else has done it and you find something that can give you the lift. I had a similar experience, like where I got a gut infection surfing on an overseas trip, surfing and traveling. And for 3 years after, I was just always thirsty. I could not quench the thirst no matter what. And then a lot of other health deterioration happened. It wasn't just that, but after I did a liver flush for the first time, I could quench my thirst. First time in 3 years. And then, I was like, okay, this is legit. Like same as you, all those supplements, none of it did it. All those, 5 to 10 doctors I saw, no one could, a lot of people could tell me this problem and that problem and this is wrong, but nobody had anything that helped move that. And then boom, one liver flush. It's like, yeah, I don't feel like I'm parched anymore, which was an amazing feeling after 3 years. And same thing, like I was unsure about it. Maybe you weren't, but I did a lot of reading and spent a lot of time in Facebook groups. And I even came across Cure Zone. I was reading posts that are 20 years old now, but there was a lot of, seems like it was quite a community at the time, like really people exploring, people who had, no other options, who'd exhausted everything else and trading some of these alternative health ideas. But so I was digging through those and, trying to sort my way through is it safe? Because people, you do see out there liver flush isn't safe, or maybe like your nutrition teacher had said, it doesn't actually do anything. But the day after, I knew it did something, because I'm like, I'm not dying for water anymore. So then did you, after that second time, when you did your second, let's say, came back to it the second time, did you just continue, or was it more of a meandering, health journey to try looking in different areas as well?
So I think it's kind of probably important to clarify that I did know that it was the kind of key in a way to unlocking my health, but the difficulty is I couldn't get it to work for me. So after that initial successful flush, I think I may have had 1 or 2 more successful flushes. And then what happened was I went back to just having unsuccessful after unsuccessful flush where nothing would come out. And I'd just feel worse. My symptoms would get worse. And I couldn't understand what was happening. I now know what was happening, but at the time I didn't know. And I would do sometimes between 5 and 7 unproductive flushes before I would get a productive flush again. It was so demoralizing. I thought, I can't do this. I remember thinking, just kind of crying, because I knew that it was the answer for me, and I couldn't understand why it wouldn't work. And I needed a lot of help to just break up all the congestion that was inside me. And what I now know is that if you have a significant candida infection, it migrates. So it migrates from the colon to the small intestine, and then it can migrate from the small intestine to the liver. So about a year and a half ago, maybe a bit more, I started to see, I hope this isn't too gross for your listeners, but I started to see the candida leaving after a flush. And it started to leave, and it's still leaving in enormous quantities. So I am just still a year and a half on eliminating masses of it. It's awful. It's horrible to talk about, but people need to know this stuff. So, it's, so that was the reason why, because when it gets into the liver, it plugs up the ducts. And so I didn't know that at the time, but I know that now. And so that's why my journey was so difficult. So it was very difficult. And for a long time, I didn't make any progress. And then I started to make progress, and I had to do a lot before I felt like I was getting the results that other people were getting with just, a dozen of them. I was having to do, 80 or something.
And by results, are you speaking about what you see come out during the flush, or how you feel? Some of both?
Yeah, I guess probably some of both. I've known people, so I always kind of have like a rule of thumb about it. I think it's your experience of liver flushing is in direct proportion to A, how old you are, B, how sick you are, and C, how long you've been sick. And I think another one would be if you have a severe gut infection or have had a history of very severe gut infections, then it also can be a bit of a struggle. But I've now hacked the process through just sheer desperation. And so now this is the system that I teach my clients, and this is the system that gets results. Thank God.
Okay, great. So you have a program that you'll take clients through, and using all your hard-won experience and
I kind of had to learn all that over 6 years and learn it the hard way. And it took me to the depths of what one can kind of endure, because every time I did one of these unproductive flushes, you can feel worse because, you get more compaction of material in the liver ducts and more compaction in the common bile duct, and therefore you get less bile passing, and then you don't digest your food, and other sort of, nervous system symptoms can happen when you get blocked that way. So I really did learn the hard way, but looking back, it's all been worth it. It was eventually worth it.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this conversation, but you know what? I want to bring you even better content in the future. One way you can make sure that happens is by hitting the follow button on your phone in Apple Podcast, Spotify, or whatever app you prefer. Now, if we're being honest with each other, you and I both know there's no way you're going to do this later. So let's take 7 seconds right now, and I'll walk you through the process. Pull out your phone, unlock it, and open Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the listening app of your choice. Now search for Wiser Than Before Podcast and hit follow. In Apple, that's the plus sign in the top right corner. And in Spotify, it's the button with the word follow just below the logo. That's it. You're all done. Doesn't it feel good to cross an item off your to-do list? Thank you for doing that. By hitting that follow button, you are actively bringing better guests and content to this podcast. Now, let's get back to the show. The electrohypersensitivity you mentioned, that would be really, really tough. And I imagine at that time, it couldn't have been very well understood or accepted by the people around you.
No. I had to wear, so I was an academic at the time, and I did a lot of marking online. And sometimes I'd have to go to these exam centers to do my marking, and it was all Wi-Fi based. And the ignominy of having to wear this head net, which was basically this sort of reinforced netting that I'd have to put over. I look like a beekeeper or something, but like a nutty one. And I'd have to sit there and do my marking online with this head net on. And it was just, I knew that people would just be like, oh, that's Elizabeth. She's a bit of a nutter.
Is the head net, is that like an EMF blocking device or what?
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I had to buy all those sorts of things. I bought head nets. I bought grounding mats. I bought a grounding mat for my bed. I had the entire house Ethernet cabled. Actually, I have to say, I'm really glad that we did that. So we've had that done in both houses that we've lived in, just Etherneted it. And I much prefer working with Ethernet. I still don't like working with Wi-Fi, but I'm fine with phones. And I can work with Wi-Fi, but I choose not to.
Right. Well, it's interesting you have to talk to someone who has such a strong, like, obvious reaction, because EMFs and especially EMFs and things like Wi-Fi that's also a small but growing topic in the health world. But a lot of people, it's kind of, it's kind of like when you're a kid, your parents tell you eat your vegetables, and no kids want to do it. With the EMFs, people who don't directly feel different, or at least aren't aware of any subtle differences, it's kind of like, okay, I'm supposed to, but is this, a lot of people aren't sure, is this even real, or can this really be affecting me? Especially with things like frequencies, they're obviously invisible. You don't see them, you can't touch them or hold them. So someone like you, it's really interesting to see, and it's becoming more common though. That's what I'd say. Like if that was happening to you 20 years ago, that's why I said, man, I can't imagine how little support there probably was, and how poorly understood it was. Because even now, people who have it just I talked to a lot of them. They feel kind of crazy, and people roll their eyes at them, and they're just going through something that very few people understand.
I think what I found interesting is, so I kind of got into that community a long time ago, and I was working for the Weston A. Price Foundation at the time, and I ended up doing like a lecture for them on electrosensitivity, and I interviewed a lot of people who had severe electrosensitivity, more severe than me, and some of them had, painted their entire house in like, I don't know if it was lead paint, but it was just something kind of insane to just, stop the kind of the wireless the radiation, I guess. And people who couldn't leave the house, who couldn't walk down a high street. There was a lot of fear around it. People who would have to go and live in safe houses. I mean, it was really crazy, and nobody really knew about them because, of course, they couldn't access any media to tell the world about what they were going through, and people don't really care anyway. But what I will say that I found quite frustrating is when I discovered that this hypersensitivity, I mean, I think everybody is sensitive to it, but it's the threshold at which you perceive symptoms, or which symptoms you can feel the symptoms. I do think it is a symptom of toxicity, because I also had multiple chemical sensitivity. So I couldn't be, I couldn't go into let's say a furniture showroom. I couldn't go into a lot of shops. I couldn't sit in a new car. So if somebody came to pick me up from their house, I couldn't get into their car if it was a new car. If I smelt petrol, I'd have to run a mile. I had it really, really seriously. And the two things went hand in hand. And what I realized when I started to cleanse my body and get rid of a lot of that toxicity, that it was sensitizing me to things in my environment that I really shouldn't have been overreacting to. And once I started to get rid of a lot of these obstructions in my liver, I no longer reacted this way to my environment. And when I discovered that, it was so powerful that I actually had this group on Facebook, Electrohypersensitivity Awareness, or whatever it was called. I can't remember now. And I was like the admin of this group. And I went onto the group and I told them all, I was like, you guys, you've got to know about this. Like, this is amazing. If you cleanse your liver and you get rid of the heavy metals, then the heavy metals are not going to kind of conduct these signals. And your cell membranes are not going to be so irritated and permeable. And you know what? They didn't want to know. Nobody wanted to know. In fact, not only did they not want to know, but they got angry with me for trying to tell them that if they just cleansed their body, they'd feel a lot better. But I mean, they were spending thousands of pounds to kind of like Wi-Fi proof their houses, and awful kind of prisons that they lived in because they couldn't live a normal life. And there was me offering a solution. And in the end, I was so disgusted with the whole attitude that I actually handed the group over to somebody else and said, I don't need this group anymore. So I was very surprised. But sometimes people are very resistant to giving up their paradigm.
That is fascinating. So now, with some time passed, looking back, like, what do you attribute that to? Is it a mindset? Is it something psychological?
I think somebody did say this to me, and I found it a bizarre comment. Somebody said, if it were that easy to overcome this by flushing your liver, then we'd all be doing it. So it was like they were saying I was coming up with a solution that was too simple or something, except the solution isn't simple. It's not simple. It requires a lot of dedication and persistence and having to change your lifestyle to a certain degree. So it was just massive resistance. I don't know. I think the idea that it could be to do with an internal condition of their own body rather than a kind of external toxic force was messing with their paradigm, because their paradigm was, this stuff is evil. This stuff is like big tech and, 5G and all the rest of it we need to dismantle. But, that's not going to happen. They're not going to be able to slow and reverse that. So there was me with a solution, and it was like they didn't want to, it was just huge resistance. I don't know, Josh, what the answer to that was, but I remember feeling absolutely flabbergasted.
Yeah. Well, I think the internal, external point you made, there's a lot to be said to that, because it is a hugely different thing to see something outside of you, yourself, as the problem versus saying, okay, it's internal, it's something in my control, whether it's health or anything else. That's a big gap for some people to cross, and it can be uncomfortable. And then it is a 180 paradigm change, because boom, suddenly the power is back in your hands. Whereas when it's external, this is being done to me. I can't do anything. And that's just a big shift inside, and different people have different abilities to make that and, accept the uncomfortable truth or the change it requires. So I could certainly see that.
I do remember, just quickly, one person in that group listened to me, and I left the group in disgust, didn't hear anything else for 6 months. And 6 months later, this guy from the group, the electrosensitivity group, contacted me, paid me 50 quid into my Ko-fi account, and said, "Hi, I'm Max. And you have basically your story and your information. I went away and looked into it. I've done this many liver flushes. I think it was about 17 or something." And he said, "And I'm cured. I don't have EHS anymore."
Wow. There you go.
Yeah. So I was happy.
That's stunning. That's so, man, that's so interesting. That whole thing, like you finding an answer or a different solution, the response you got, and even just stepping back before that, because a lot of people with ongoing health issues, there's a lot of anger towards doctors and conventional medicine, because so many people felt like they were told it's all in your head. But just hearing the whole timeline of your story, there's a few of those things at play. Like you were clearly physically affected by the electrohypersensitivity, and then also you found the aspect of it. Like you said, you still had to do stuff, but you found part that was more under your control. So I mean, there's so much. I guess people go through such difficult journeys with these chronic health issues that aren't easily fixable, that medicine's really not equipped for. It's more for if you're going to manage something chronically, managing it with drugs, or something acute where it's amazing, fixing broken bones and things like that. So many people are trying to use a tool that's not really built for that, like solving the chronic health issue. So there's a tremendous amount of stress and frustration and difficulty that people go through just from the mental aspect of being confused, not having good answers, maybe even having really smart people, professionals, not believe them, and then your story kind of gives the flip side of what the more conventional medicine sees in people. Is like, well, we don't know what's going on, and no one's trying to do anything bad to you, but it does make sense to me. The toxicity can build up in the body, and then you can have all kinds of symptoms. It's literally going haywire because it's not meant to operate that way.
I think also people don't know who to trust. And there's so much competing information out there about lifestyle and health, from, doing raw vegan diets to being a carnivore, the whole spectrum is that people are confused. They don't know who to trust. And if they don't know how to connect the dots in their own body, because it's like being a sleuth, isn't it? In a way, you have to be able to, the body's always talking to us, but it's whether we can not just hear it, but also interpret what it's trying to say and where the problem is. And it's hard for most people to know who to trust.
I completely agree. I think what you just said right there is actually one of, if not the most important things that people need to do if they're going to climb out of a chronic health issue, because you're totally right. If you just go online or searching, you're going to get 1,000 different opinions, and some of them are completely contrasting, so they're literally opposite: carnivore, vegan, this supplement, that supplement. And so different things work for different people. And so you really do need to be in touch with what your body is saying, how it responds, even at different times. I've taken some supplement, I'm like, this is the greatest thing on earth. And then 3 months later, body didn't want it. It would start causing side effects, So being able to listen to your body, to be able to adjust, that's hugely important. And it is a skill, it's built through trial and error, unfortunately, because it's just not something that's emphasized in our culture. Most people don't grow up with that. I think in the past or other more traditional cultures, it may have been, people may have been more in touch with that, but now we're pretty numb to it. And so it does take some, paying some attention and like I said, just trial and error to kind of smash your way through it or stumble your way through it till you start to get more in tune with those parts of yourself. That could really be a gift on the other side, I think, which is tough to keep in mind, with the pain. It's the painful slog of chronic health, but on the other side, it's like you get in touch with this deep part of yourself and you really see yourself in a different way and just live your life in a different way because you are in touch more deeply. Like, what's truly good for me? What's going to build health? What's going to build my spirit versus take away?
Yeah. And sometimes you have to reach a certain threshold before you can even think like that. I do think that a lot of, liver stagnation or whatever you want to call it, body stagnation and the emotional stagnation go hand in hand. And unfortunately, when someone's really stagnant physically, it can be very difficult for them to make the shifts in terms of their lifestyle that they need to be able to make because they are just feeling emotionally, lethargic, stagnant, also indecision, like a lot of indecisiveness, feeling like you don't know who to trust or you don't trust yourself or not being able to take action on the things you should. So for me, like I see it a lot in people is that the physical and the emotional stagnation are 100% connected.
And do you find one needs to move first, or it's totally holistic and need to get movement in both?
I think ultimately movement in both, but sometimes it can be the physical can be a good place to start because if they can take action on that and then they can feel better, then that can give them the motivation to carry on. But I think even, reflecting on my own kind of progress with my health, there's lots of things that I had studied or done in the past that I couldn't even take action on or couldn't even implement because I just felt kind of depressed or lethargic or, congested. We use the word congestion a lot in the liver flushing community. And congestion can mean a whole host of things from angry and upset to unable to digest your food or, having sleep issues or anger issues or losing your rag at people, all of that. When you start to remove the obstructions in your liver and you experience bile flow for the first time, and I'm sure you must have experienced this given you've done a liver flush, the euphoria that can come with that bile flow. And you realize, oh my goodness, this person who I've been for God knows how long, that thing that I thought was part of my personality isn't part of my personality at all. It's just part of this toxicity that I've been carrying around with me, because actually I realize, my personality, I would say, has evolved hugely and changed massively in the last few years. Like I'm just becoming the person I always kind of should have been, but couldn't really, fulfill that potential.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's cool to hear. I totally agree. Like even these little, like I remember reading, or maybe in one of these liver flush groups, but about the indecision, for example. And I never realized the extent that I had it. And I started paying attention to it. I'm like, oh my God, it takes me like 3 days to order a simple thing off Amazon for the house. Cause I'm like going back and forth. Should I get this one or that one? And it's like $10. And as the congestion started clearing out, it was like, boom, boom. I could just make a decision. No problem. I'm like, wow, this is nicer. And the emotions too, like some point in my early 30s, I kind of became a little bit more aware of emotions and my emotional health or lack thereof. So I started really making it a point to, get more in touch with them, to work with them more. And I found it at some point really difficult. Like it just felt stuck and didn't move. And I did, so much self-work, coaching work, workshops, all kinds of stuff. And after certain liver flushes, again, not every one every time, but certain times things would just move. And suddenly I'm like a happier, lighter person. I'm like, oh my gosh, all that heavy sludge, like emotional sludge. I'm like, I'm trying for years to move it or process it or, accept it. And then it's just not there anymore. I'm like, this is incredible. But very much like what you said, like, this is who I always was. And there's just a bunch of junk stacked on top that I didn't even know about. But it was interesting to see, and to go back to what we were chatting about just a little bit earlier, like making some movement physically really drove some other emotional change too. But I know other people who've like, they do get to the root of an emotional problem, of a resentment to someone close to them, for example, and they are able to let it go or release it or something. And then boom, physically, they suddenly start feeling better. So it's very amazing the way everything's intertwined in the body.
Absolutely. And vice versa, I've noticed that as I've made physical progress with removing kind of historic layers of congestion from my liver, I've actually processed and dealt with perhaps regrets or things from my past that have just hung around in the sort of recesses of my brain for maybe the last 25 years. I had that experience recently. And what was really interesting, it sounds a bit esoteric, but I'm sure it's connected, is I started having a recurring, this memory coming back again and again. And it was like it was coming to the surface, ready to be cleansed. I know it sounds nuts, but it felt like I'd always had this memory that this unresolved issue in my life that I kind of felt I'd never really dealt with. It would ebb and flow, but it would always come back. And then, and then like about a year ago, I felt I had dreaming about it a lot. And I was thinking about it during the day, and it felt like it was sort of almost swimming up to my conscious again and again. I thought, well, why is that happening? And as I flushed, it would get more intense afterwards. And then I did this flush a few months ago, and it sort of went. And then when I thought about that memory again, it didn't have any of the emotional baggage that it had previously. So I felt like it was coming to the surface because it sounds crazy. It was literally some kind of material that was connected to it at that time in my life that my liver had parceled up and put in that particular, pocket from my 20s.
Yeah, I completely believe it. I mean, emotions our form of energy. And when any type of energy can't flow through the body, yeah, it's just exactly what you said. It gets packed up and stored and stagnant. I mean, that's a basis of like acupuncture, Chinese medicine, is to get the energy to flow, and poor health comes from the stagnation when it's not. So I completely believe that. Wow, that's amazing. That must have felt great.
Yeah, it did. It felt unbelievable, and also it was a surprise to me that something that was about a physical elimination could have this emotional component.
Yeah, I got a big surprise after one round of flushing. I would wake up and I started humming and singing, and I realized, my God, I haven't done that, 20 years, maybe 30 years, maybe since I was a little kid. And I just thought it wasn't part of my personality, but all of a sudden, and it wasn't just like one morning, it was happening, not every morning, but frequently. And I was like, it just blew me away. It's like how much my life was spent with, that covered up, some happiness covered up or lightness covered up. And then on the flip side, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I guess, it's just like a natural happiness coming through me. And if you would have told myself like 10 years ago, if I would have heard that, I would have just been like, that's a load of crap. Like, I would never believe it and never, just kind of like deny it or think it's not possible. So it's amazing. It is amazing. And I guess there's some good surprises in there too, not just scary ones that get flushed out. What else do you feel helped you a lot in addition to the liver flushes?
So I think definitely that's been kind of number one, and changing so everything else kind of followed on from that, I guess. So that's quite interesting, really, now I think about it, is that everything else that's flowed better in my life as a result has been because of liver flushes. Like I even had the confidence to kind of launch my business and start, doing group coaching programs as a result of just, I guess, more self-belief. And that came off the back of flushing. So everything has followed from flushes. But I would say, obviously, dietary kind of interventions are important. But again, I don't think I would have been able to tolerate the dietary interventions I've made if it weren't for flushing. So I now eat a lot of fiber, soluble fiber, and I can eat fermented foods again. And I just couldn't tolerate, my gut just could not tolerate any of that stuff for forever, really. So I feel great on the diet that I have now. It's so different from the diet that I had years ago. Years ago, I ate kind of this high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet because that was what everybody advocated for Candida infection. And these days, I eat a reasonably low-fat, high-carb, lots of beans, lots of fiber. And I love my diet. Like I really thrive on it, and I don't have any sugar cravings anymore. So what I eat makes me feel good. I'm able to exercise. I'm also using these days more kind of energy techniques. So I actually kind of did an EFT and another energy technique course a few years ago, actually, just after, before I had my son. But I think, again, coming back to what we talked about before, I think I was so emotionally stuck and so kind of congested emotionally that I couldn't really use the techniques in the way that I would have liked to. And so that has been a natural evolution with just having more mental and emotional clarity, and also just feeling more connected to, I suppose, some kind of spiritual presence in my life, which again, like you said about you, if anyone had told you a few years ago that you were going to, feel it was possible to, deal with your emotions in this way, that you would have been absolutely astonished. Well, if anyone had told me, you're a very right-brained, academic, logical person, that I would be developing a spiritual component to my life and to my practice, I would have laughed and laughed. I just would never have believed it. So, that's been another really lovely thing, just evolving this understanding and I guess use of energy techniques and realizing that they can be used alongside, the physical practices, the detox, the nutrition, to just, I guess, a lot of chronically ill people, I think, have this constant self-talk, negative self-talk in their minds. And when you've been ill for a long time, like I was, you can end up monitoring, so self-monitoring all the time and checking in with your symptoms all the time. And we don't even realize that we're doing it. And so that can be very disadvantageous if you're chronically ill, because every time you're doing that, you're kind of telling your brain that you're in a bit of a fight or flight situation. So a lot of chronically ill patients are doing all the right things with their diet. They're taking all the right supplements. They're trying to get plenty of sleep. But they're kind of constantly in this anxious state, like, do I feel better or worse than I did yesterday? Do I feel better or worse than I did an hour ago? Or what's this symptom that's come up now? Why do I feel like this? Constant self-talk. And so EFT and these other energy techniques are just brilliant for addressing that and freeing up the body so that it can do more healing and less living in this low vibration fight or flight mode all the time.
Yeah. Do you have people do that alongside the liver flush, or does it depend? Like you said, your previous self, some of these things that are good ideas just weren't working with this congestion level you had.
So I think ideally it would be great if people did both. But it's chicken and egg, isn't it? Because like we said before, sometimes you have to deal with the physical stuff first, get people on that path, and then you can deal with the emotional. And for some people, I guess, who have a fear of starting with the physical detox, maybe using EFT or other kind of emotional, energetic work to tackle some of those fear-based negative reactions, just to kind of calm the nervous system and make them feel safe.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Different people, it's gonna work different ways. I learned about this concept of yoga, which is just paraphrasing, but it's something like they view, say, 5 different aspects of health or life, and that you need to be doing all 5. You can't just do one and then expect growth or progress in that realm. And that helped me a lot with just thinking about my own health or life. Like I'm like, okay, I can't just do supplements. I can't just do even liver flush, but try and bring in some nervous system support or emotional support. And then at different times, it felt like they weren't moving at all, say maybe one of those things. But then at other times, boom, I'd get a breakthrough. And the $1 million question would be, which thing at one time, but I don't know if it's, I don't think it's that straightforward or easy, but having, some tools that you stay consistent with is I think people can, just get a breakthrough in one of the areas. And just like with you, with that liver flush, like it's the light comes in through the window. It's a little bit of hope, a little bit of uplifting. And then, that gives you the energy for the next step.
Why EFT and other kind of energy techniques can be so helpful if you are doing detox is that there will be periods where the detox gets challenging. So there might be periods where you're going deeper with the liver flushing and you are experiencing periods of congestion in between liver flushes. As people do more and they go deeper, those challenging periods of congestion can get more frequent. And so having a tool like EFT or emotional transformation technique, which is the other one that I do, really just helps people to carry on functioning while they're dealing with their physical congestion. Because sometimes physical congestion can be a bit debilitating and you can feel lethargic or you can feel, lacking in kind of sense of positivity about the future and things like that. So EFT can get you out of a hole quickly when you need when you basically just need to carry on, working or functioning or looking after your family or looking after, caring responsibilities or whatever it is. You've got to keep going. You've got to keep getting up in the morning. And so sometimes doing something like that, which works on the subconscious, I think is quicker and more effective than having to do some kind of talking therapy.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think those periods of stagnation, you said they can get, as a person goes further or gets deeper, those periods can be more frequent, right? Did I hear that right? Why do you think that's the case, as opposed to it being less frequent as someone's progressing?
Because the toxic matter that you're encountering, if you think about the liver, cleansing the liver is almost like layers of congestion going back in a rock face. The stuff that you're beginning to encounter is older and it's super toxic. And sometimes when you pass that, you get a lot of toxic bile that comes behind it. So if you think about it, you're removing like these boulders and these stones, but then you're unlocking ducts and they're draining into the common bile duct. And as that happens, that can cause unpleasant, sometimes kind of Herx reactions. And then what's happening almost inevitably is you're then getting older congestion moving forward. And as you're getting older congestion moving forward, it's coming down into the common bile duct. And then you've got bile kind of sweeping over that toxic matter every time you produce bile to digest your food. This is all theoretical. So there's no research into it. So we have no concrete, definitive kind of clinical based evidence. But having studied it for a number of years and talking to other veterans like me who've done many flushes, there's a period where it can get a bit harder. You've still got all the gains that you made, but you're going back into historical stuff and it's pretty toxic. And if you've been really poorly, really sick for a long time, that stuff's nasty. And as it comes out, it can make you feel a bit horrible. And so what you have to try and do is during that time, in between flushes, you have to try and just keep bile flowing. So that's why I've worked a lot on trying to kind of hack that process where you're just keeping the bile moving so you're not stagnating. And then stuff like the EFT and the other energy work just helps to just deal with the kind of the emotional and the mental clarity and the sense of determination and positivity that you need to keep going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's a nice support stack, basically, because I've experienced some of what you're talking about too, and it's so frustrating. Cause like I felt better, and now I feel just sick and nauseous, and it's a week after the flush. You're expecting to bounce back. So yeah, it totally makes sense.
How many have you done, Josh? If you don't mind me asking.
No, I don't mind. I'm coming up on a year now, so probably 10 to 12. About every month or so. And yeah, it's been up and down. So it's so I'm just appreciative of what you're sharing, and I hope the right people come across this, because like I had so many times where I was just confused, because you think you're doing the right thing but feel worse. And I think you've summarized it and given some really good insights. And then the stack and tools you're mentioning just to support people to keep going. And you really have to, or what I experienced is I really had to detach from how I felt on a day-to-day basis, not numbing, but just not letting that affect, my overall goal and what my plan was moving forward, because the body's just like so many layers, like you said. And so it's moving at a different time than your logical mind. And it takes, some days or weeks or months for things to kind of transform and clear out and change. But it was so confusing. I will say that very frequently. I'm like, I do not understand this, what I'm feeling.
It is confusing. And I think we all learn it. We all have to kind of learn it. And I've only, I guess, cobbled together a theory of why it happens through just my own experience and looking at that of my clients. But I think as you go deeper, you do go through a period of when it gets harder, but then you also get periods where you feel really good. But you will also get detox reactions. That's one of the things that happens. You are essentially you're saying to the body, right, you can now heal all these other things that are going on. Now you've got the resources to do that. And sometimes people do experience, because they can't, the liver kind of can't heal things quickly enough before our drainage channels get blocked. And so a lot of the time, you're kind of dealing with some of those issues. But the important thing is to try and keep the bile thin and to keep it moving. And that's the secret to feeling better between liver flushes. And I think at the moment now, I think I've got that system working much better than it ever has been before. So I feel quite pleased that there are these tools that people can use to just, get through those difficult periods after a flush.
Yeah, absolutely. So without asking for any trade secrets, because I know you do this and take people through a group, and health's never, so easy as a quick answer, but can you share what you find to be helpful to keep that bile thinning, or even just how frequently you'll recommend people go to their next flush? Because I suppose that would be another way to make some movement in stagnation if they're ready for it.
So I would say, some of the instructions or some of the suggestions that I made with the kind of Chanca and the green tea, that is a really nice tool to keep bile thin. Eating bitter foods, taking bitters. There are also herbs you can use. Gold coin grass herb seems to be a really good one. And you can use Epsom salts. So you can use Epsom salts in small or kind of almost homeopathic doses to keep, because what Epsom salt does is it promotes gallbladder emptying. So you can use it kind of therapeutically in small amounts to keep bile flowing in between flushes. So you can carry on taking prep. It's the stuff that you used to prepare for your flush. You can carry on taking some of that stuff after your flush just to keep bile moving. And just avoiding kind of, the common culprits of bile congesting foods. So, just don't eat fried foods. Fried foods are one of the worst. Don't eat a lot of chocolate. Tiny amounts of alcohol seem to be fine. Moderate or high alcohol consumption is really bad for the liver. Green tea. What would the other culprits be? Another kind of rabbit hole to go down, which we don't have to discuss in great detail, but is the vitamin A issue. I don't know if you've come across that in your practice. Vitamin A toxicity. The work of a guy called Grant Genereux, who's like, I think he's an engineer, but he basically seized upon vitamin A consumption to excess consumption as being a contributing factor to his eczema and psoriasis. And there's actually quite a lot of research out there to show that when the liver gets overwhelmed or when there is poor bile flow, then vitamin A can become a problem. And some people find that high vitamin A foods can cause impede bile flow. So if there are a lot of people out there with poor bile flow, poor liver function, and they're eating liver, don't do it. I would just never eat liver. So what I know now about vitamin A, I would never eat liver. So I'd only rarely eat eggs. And I love eggs. I actually can eat eggs now fine, but I had to actually go on a vitamin A detox for a couple of years and found it enormously helpful. But I didn't eat eggs at all in that time, and no coloured vegetables, no carrots. But anyway, it's a topic probably for another time. But I would say if you do have kind of liver bile flow issues and you're eating a lot of those foods, maybe just go and do some research into vitamin A toxicity.
Yeah. We won't go all the way into it now. But very interesting point, and just another example what we spoke about earlier of different ideas or different things that work for people. Because eating liver is such a buzzword now, and you mentioned you worked with Weston A. Price. They're big on that, and in some cases people find benefits. So it really comes back to the individual knowing your body and, finding what works for you or finding someone, like you said, that you trust. And really, I feel it's important that you're on the same wavelength. Like you like the person's approach, you want to try that approach, and then you choose to go down that path together is where people have the most success versus trying to say who's the one person who has, everything's 100% right. It just doesn't exist because people are so different. Well, thank you so much for all the information you shared, sharing your story. It's very, very incredible. Definitely a story of persistence, and it's a great gift you can give to people now, saving them some of the trouble and sharing your wisdom. If people want to work with you, do one of your groups, or follow you for more of your information, where's the best place for them to find you? People can find me on Instagram at Naturally Wells, and I also have a YouTube channel at Naturally Wells. Okay, great. And if they want to do a program, can they find that through your Instagram bio? Is there a link, or what's the best way? Yes. Yeah, I have a link in my bio, and also you can just, drop me a direct message. That's absolutely fine. I'll get back to anybody who's interested. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I can recommend the Instagram account. Your musical palette will likely expand too. Some good tunes you have tied to some videos. Excellent. Brilliant. I'm glad. Yeah, I've had a few comments about that actually. It's always a pleasure. I love putting music on my reels and stuff. So yeah, it's always nice to come across new stuff from my end. So, all right. Well, Elizabeth, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again, and we appreciate it. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you and discussing all things liver related. It's been brilliant. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you feel you're walking away wiser than before. I want to bring you even better episodes in the future. One way you can make sure that happens is by rating this podcast. The more of you who rate this podcast positively, the better guests I can bring you. Since you and I both know you're not going to do this later, I'll walk you through the 10-second process right now. All you have to do is follow along. Take out your phone and unlock it. Open up Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever app you listen on, and search for Wiser Than Before Podcast and click on the show. In Apple Podcasts, you have to scroll down towards the bottom, past the most recent episodes. When you get to the ratings and reviews section, click on the blank stars to rate. In Spotify, beneath the logo and name of the show, you'll see 3 horizontal dots. They're just to the right of the bell and settings icons. Click those 3 dots, and the second option is to rate the show. Hit the blank stars and fill them in. All done. You can cross that off your to-do list and start looking forward to even better episodes in the future. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week, even wiser than before.